Glad you could join me again today. You know, these dark days of January can really take the toll on our spirit, can't they? It can seem so dark. And here in England, it's just cold and kind of, like I say, cold and miserable. The sun sets about 4 o'clock in the evening, doesn't come back up till like 8 o'clock in the morning. And then the day is filled with mist and fog and a damp that just creeps into your bones until you just can't find a way to stay warm. It's such a dreary, dreary season here. And they can seem just so very long. But we have to say to ourselves, brighter days are ahead. Those little snowdrops are out there trying to push their little heads through the soil. And so it doesn't make me know that this is just a season. It's just a time right now, and spring is really on its way. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 16, we can read, "Wherein we greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations." Winter is only a season. Unless you live in the Arctic Circle, I guess. Rejoice and delight are my words for the year 2025. And so this made a really great verse for me to think about, because God says that during this season, when you're in manifold temptations, you should rejoice, greatly rejoice, whatever that season might be. And that word through is very interesting. It doesn't mean a place or a time, and it holds no promise of an ending. It means that we are in a problem. It could really read, we are in heaviness in or by or because of manifold temptations. So in this season, we might be in many temptations, and the light might be hard to find. It might be hard to find that warm spot, and we find out that warm spot kind of cools off too quickly unless we just stay right there. Well, Spurgeon was like many of us. He suffered from depression, and he had that periodic feeling of feeling down or heaviness or that breaking of the spirit. And I wanted to share with you some of the things he wrote about the season of heaviness. Here's what he said. "Ah, beloved," he says, "it is that breaking down of the spirit, that pulling down of the strong man, that is the very fester of the soreness of God's scourging, the blueness of the wound whereby the soul is made better." Isn't that the part that hurts us the most? That festering soreness, might say, in our spiritual life. We can't figure out what's going on, what's wrong. That season that just pulls us down, and we think, I know better than this, but we just can't seem to lift our spirits up. You know, winter does have a purpose, and every season has its allotted purpose, whether it be a literal season or a time of dire need in our life. You know, the snow feeds the soil, doesn't it? The rain falls and waters the vegetation. The leaves fall, and then they create the rest and the renewal that's needed for the trees. So to everything there is a season and a purpose under heaven. You remember Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So don't fear the season. Just let it do its work. And then Spurgeon gives 4 reasons why a season of heaviness can be an absolute need in our life. And I wanted to go through these 4 with you today. He says if we are not in heaviness during our trials, we would not know the fellowship of Christ's suffering, for he experienced heaviness too. Matthew 26 records that his soul was exceeding sorrowful even unto death, and he began to be very heavy. So Christ understands our seasons of heaviness, and he knows how we feel. A friend shared a video with me last week with a speaker that was encouraging people to not fear the wilderness, and I liked that phrase. God does, he said, his best work in the wilderness. And then he went on to tell us things that happened in the wilderness, where God called Moses with the burning of the bush in the wilderness, where Elijah heard that still small voice of God when he was hiding away from God in the wilderness, and Hagar was met and encouraged by the Lord in the time of the wilderness, and even Jesus faced temptation in the wilderness. So in the wilderness is where we often meet Christ most intimately. So let's not fear the wilderness. The second reason Spurgeon gives is that if we felt no heaviness during tribulation, we would grow too proud or too self-sufficient. You know, trouble has a way of humbling us, doesn't it? Maybe that's why we don't like it so much, because we would rather believe that we are self-sufficient and we're impenetrable. But God knows that we need a dose of humble pie once in a while to remind us of our place and to keep us from feeling too proud. You know, Peter, he was that boastful and proud apostle, and he encourages us in Peter, he says, humble yourself therefore under the hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Peter knew the value of humility. And I like Psalm chapter 40, verse 17. I am poor and needy, yet the Lord thinketh on me. You know, tribulations have a way of reminding us of our neediness, and they also remind us of God's love and his genuine care. Spurgeon says that discipline is another reason for heaviness. For in heaviness, he says, we often learn lessons that we otherwise would not learn. That dark night of the soul has a purpose: to teach us humility, to correct us, to assure us of God's love. And if we throw in the towel too quickly, we fail to learn the lesson, and we miss the beauty of that season. There's a great book by Paul Billheimer called Don't Waste Your Sorrows. And years ago, Tom and I were going through a deep trial, one that really could have greatly affected our ministry. But by God's providence, we had both read this book just before the trial began, and the truths that we learned there supported us through that season. So if you're in a dark season, this might make a good book for you to read. The fourth point that Spurgeon brings out is that heaviness is an essential use to a Christian if he would do good to others. And he writes something really, I think, kind of funny, but kind of true as well. He says, there are many great Christian people that I would say I should like to see afflicted, but I will not say as much as that. I should like to see them heavy in spirit. If it were the Lord's will that they should be bowed down greatly, I would not express a word of regret, or a little sympathy would do, or a little more sympathy would do for them. A little more power to sympathize would be a precious boon to them, and even if it were purchased by a short journey through a burning fiery furnace, they might not rue the day afterwards in which they were called to pass through the flame. There are none so tender as those who have been skinned themselves. Those who have been in the chamber of affliction know how to comfort those who are there. Do not believe that any man will become a physician unless he walks the hospitals. And I am sure that no one will become a divine or a comforter unless he lies in the hospital as well as walks through it and has to suffer himself. God cannot make ministers, and I speak with reverence of his holy name. He cannot make a Barnabas except in the fire. And you know who Barnabas was? He was called the son of consolation. He was the disciple who stretched out mercy and acceptance to Paul and to John Mark. He's known as a man of comfort. And 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 4 reads, who, meaning God, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. When we go through a trial, it equips us to serve others better, for we truly can then say, I understand, and we can share the things that God taught us with them as they go through their trial. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 and 16, we read, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Do you see the correlation? God comforts us so that we can comfort others. And Christ experienced our temptations and had victory over them. And then he invites us to come to him when we have great need or are in times of heaviness, because he truly can say that he understands. Is God trying to do a work in you or in your life through tribulations or by the tribulations you face? Is he trying to make a Barnabas out of you? Are you greatly rejoicing in this season, learning all you can about his comforts? You can, and you can allow this bruise to make you much better. I'll see you next week.